A while back I released 7 major events before the Harry Potter story started, parts 1 and 2, segments of a series where I discuss events that took place prior to the books and films. Harry Potter lore is way deeper than some people realize, maybe not Tolkien level deep, but that's asking a lot. So today we're going to be winding the clocks back once again and exploring 7 more significant events in Harry Potter canon. The last video left us in the early parts of the 16th century, so today we'll be picking things up in the latter half. Let's dive into it. Introduction of the International Statute of Secrecy, 1692. Once upon a time, the Muggle and magical worlds coexisted. Witches and wizards lived in Muggle towns, and magic was performed in plain sight. There were no hidden alleys, no enchanted barriers, and no need for secrecy. Magic was simply another part of daily life. But over that time, that coexistence began to fracture. As Muggle societies grew more structured and religious authority tightened its grip, fear of the unknown took hold. Magic, once tolerated, even relied upon, came to be viewed as unnatural, dangerous, and heretical. Acts of witchcraft, regardless of intent, were increasingly met with suspicion, hostility, and violence. By the late medieval period, persecution had become widespread. Witch hunts, executions, and public trials created an atmosphere of fear on both sides. While many accused were innocent muggles, real witches and wizards were also caught in the crossfire, forced to hide their abilities or flee altogether. And so naturally, the magical community eventually reached a breaking point. In an effort to protect the magical community, wizarding leaders made a decisive choice: total separation. This decision culminated in the International Statute of Secrecy, a global agreement that permanently withdrew the magical world from Muggle society. The law was first signed in 1689 and officially put into effect in 1692. Wizarding society wasn't always so hidden, not systematically anyway. During the medieval period, wizards were persecuted brutally by Muggles, who were afraid of magic but not very good at recognizing it. This caused many wizards to operate in self-imposed secrecy. Extremist wizards wanted war against Muggles, but the wider community instead opted for secrecy, an international law enforced by each country's Ministry of Magic, which was responsible for concealing societies, controlling magical beasts, beings and spirits, and making sure wizards don't blow everyone's cover. The introduction of the law, however, was certainly not devoid of controversy. The International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy has been the source of a contentious debate in wizarding society, namely because people have asked whether wizards should be the ones living underground. This is perhaps one of the most important wizarding laws, as it's directly responsible for the line separating Muggle from magical, and breaches of this law are taken particularly seriously, perhaps more seriously than anything else, with severe punishments for any kind of infraction. However, given the growing tension between both worlds, I think that this was perhaps one of the most pivotal in wizarding history, as it helped preserve a future for both. The Magical Congress of the United States of America forms, 1693. Similar to the British Ministry of Magic, MACUSA operates as the governing body for the wizarding community in the United States, with its day-to-day operations stemming from its headquarters in the Woolworth Building in New York. Unsurprisingly, its 1693 formation date was a direct response to the Salem witch trials and to the introduction of the International Statute of Secrecy. Since then, they've been responsible for maintaining the statute within the diverse and vast American magical society. Throughout its history, MACUSA has faced various challenges and had to relocate its headquarters multiple times. It had no cooperation with the no-mag government due to the hostile relationship between magical and non-magical people in America. And in response to a major breach of the Statute of Secrecy caused by Dorcas Twelvetrees, MACUSA enacted Rappaport's Law, which enforced strict segregation between wizards and non-magical individuals. Similar to the Ministry of Magic, MACUSA has a wide variety of departments spanning all manners of magical or other issues. These include the Body for Protection of Magical Species, the Department of Aurors, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, the Department of No-Mag Misinformation, the Department of Unidentifiable Magical Objects, the Department for Confiscated Items, the Federal Bureau of Covert Vigilance and No-Mag Obliviation, the MACUSA Surveillance Wizarding Resources Department, the Magical Cleaning Department, the Major Investigation Department, the Office for Magic Relations and Education, and the Wizarding Resources Department. Formation of the Ministry of Magic, 1707. Formed in 1707, the British Ministry of Magic is the main governing body of the magical communities of the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales, as well as Ireland. You might be surprised to hear that the British ministry was formed after MACUSA, but that's only because the ministry took over, replaced the previous governing body, the Wizards' Council. The goal of the organisation is simple: to preserve magical law within Great Britain and to represent these countries to the larger wizarding world. Prior to 1707, the Wizards' Council was the longest serving, though not the only body to govern the magical community in Britain. After the imposition of the International Statute of Secrecy in 1692, however, the wizarding community needed a more highly structured, organised, and more complex governing structure than they had hitherto used, to support, regulate, and communicate with a community in hiding. This, of course, led to what is now known as the Ministry of Magic. The headquarters for the British Ministry of Magic is located well beneath His Majesty's Treasury Building in central London, deep underground. Witches and wizards employed by the ministry can enter by flute network or apparition. From this underground headquarters, the ministry will go on to regulate every aspect of magical life in Britain, from education and transportation to law enforcement and secrecy. More importantly, it established the bureaucratic framework that defined how the wizarding world would function for centuries to come. Formation of the Auror Office, 1707. Unsurprisingly, the formation of the ministry directly corresponds with the formation of the Auror Office, a specialized branch of magical law enforcement under the wizarding government. Its creation marked a shift away from informal or localized responses to dark magic, as prior to this, threats posed by dark witches and wizards were handled inconsistently. The Auror Office centralized this responsibility into a single, professionally trained force. Aurors were tasked with investigating dark magical activity, pursuing dangerous offenders, and enforcing ministry law in situations considered too severe for standard enforcement. The formation of the Auror Office reflects the ministry's broader move towards structured governance following the International Statute of Secrecy. Azkaban starts being used, 1718. When the Ministry of Magic first discovered Dementors on the island that would later house Azkaban prison, the decision was made to leave the island alone entirely. This decision was driven mainly out of the fear that anyone attempting to destroy it would be met with the island's revenge. However, shortly after the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy was introduced, that all changed, when the Minister for Magic at the time, and the second ever official Minister for Magic, I might add, Damocles Rowell, decided that the system for imprisoning witches and wizards at that time was no longer going to work, primarily due to concerns surrounding security. Before Azkaban became the spot for imprisoning witches and wizards, there were many different locations that someone who broke wizarding law could be locked up. The Ministry of Magic felt that the small wizarding prisons that existed up and down the country in various towns and villages posed a security risk, because attempts by incarcerated witches and wizards to break out often led to undesirable bangs, smells, and light shows. A purpose-built prison, located on some remote Hebridean island, was preferred, and plans had been drawn up when Damocles Rowell became Minister for Magic. Instead of pursuing a purpose-built prison for wizarding criminals, Rowell pushed to utilize the existing infrastructure at Azkaban. Rowell was an authoritarian who'd risen to power on an anti-Muggle agenda, capitalizing on the anger felt by much of the wizarding community at being forced to go underground. Sadistic by nature, Rowell scrapped the plans for the new prison at once and insisted on using Azkaban. He claimed that the Dementors living there were an advantage. They could be harnessed as guards, saving the ministry time, trouble, and expense. In spite of opposition from many wizards, among them experts on both Dementors and buildings with Azkaban's kind of dark history, Rowell carried out his plan, and soon a steady trickle of prisoners had been placed there. None ever emerged. If they were not mad and dangerous before being placed in Azkaban, they swiftly became so. Rowell continued in his role for a number of years before being ousted, and was eventually succeeded by the third ever Minister for Magic, Perseus Parkinson, who shared similarly hateful views on Muggles, even going as far as to try and ban witches and wizards from marrying Muggles. Rowell was succeeded by Perseus Parkinson, who was likewise pro-Azkaban. By the time that Eldritch Diggory took over as Minister for Magic, the prison had been operating for 15 years. There had been no breakouts and no breaches of security. The new prison seemed to be working well. It was only when Diggory went to visit that he realized exactly what conditions inside were like. Prisoners were mostly insane, and a graveyard had been established to accommodate those that died of despair. By the time Eldritch Diggory, the only minister who may have actually opposed the use of Azkaban, took over, it was too late, as Azkaban had proven itself a competent holding facility. However, he did still question the use of Dementors as prison guards, launching a committee to look into things further. Back in London, Diggory established a committee to explore alternatives to Azkaban, or at least to remove the Dementors as guards. Experts explained to him that the only reason the Dementors were mostly confined to the island was that they were being provided with a constant supply of souls on which to feed. If deprived of prisoners, they were likely to abandon the prison and head for the mainland. This advice notwithstanding, Diggory had been so horrified by what he had seen inside Azkaban that he pressed the committee to find alternatives. Before they could reach any decision, however, Diggory caught dragonpox and died. Diggory tried his best during his years as minister to find a replacement for the Dementors that inhabited Azkaban, but due to his untimely death at the hands of dragonpox, this plan never came to fruition, which meant that, after Diggory, no Minister for Magic questioned the activities of Azkaban for 265 years, with minister after minister choosing to turn a blind eye to the inhumane conditions inside of the fortress. Goblin Rebellion of 1752. Wizarding history certainly has its fair share of goblin rebellions, and honestly, given how witches and wizards treat goblins, it's not surprising. In this example, the Goblin Rebellion of 1752 was the next time goblins stood up for themselves, a rebellion much bloodier than the battle at Hogsmeade over 100 years prior. This time, the goblins pledged themselves to an unlikely alliance, a partnership with werewolves. With the primal beasts on their side, the goblins wreaked havoc across Britain. The reigning Minister of Magic at the time, Albert Boot, was so embarrassed by his inability to control the goblins that he was forced to step down, and not long after, his replacement, a pureblood named Basil Flack, was forced to retire as well. This Goblin Rebellion was so terrible that Flack only lasted 8 weeks in office. Guess he got a lot of flack. And it was Flack's successor, Hephaestus Gore, who eventually turned the tides of battle and stopped the rebellion for good. In a series of bloody contests, Gore defeated both the goblins and werewolves, and even killed one of their greatest champions in battle, a goblin warrior known as Vargot. But only shortly after, another disgruntled goblin hero would arise, Urg the Unclean, and he was probably the only goblin warrior that Harry Potter and his classmates knew about because he was depicted on a chocolate frog card. When we look at Urg's origins, we'll actually find some pretty sad insight into the life of a goblin. For most of his days, it seemed like Urg had to always be careful where he walked, and try his best to avoid eye contact with human wizards and witches. Their never-ending jeers were a constant threat whenever Urg just wanted to walk to the local grocer's, or stop by a pub that served his kind. And worse, Urg had to mentally prepare himself to endure physical bullying as well. It was after one of these events, when a group of wizarding students threw him into a body of water, that Urg decided enough was enough. Tired of being treated like a second-class citizen, Urg organized his fellow goblins and led a rebellion. This rebellion, like the others before it, was eventually put down with the superior numbers and wands of the Ministry of Magic. Most dangerous triwizard tournament in history, 1792. Interestingly, 1792 was actually the last year that the tournament ran before 1994, when Harry ends up participating in the Goblet of Fire. However, the tournament itself actually dates back 700 years in total, which means that there was a 200-year hiatus after the events of this one. The Triwizard Tournament was first established some 700 years ago as a friendly competition between the three largest European schools of wizardry, Hogwarts, Beauxbaton, and Durmstrang. A champion was selected to represent each school, and the three champions competed in 3 magical tasks. The schools took it in turns to host the tournament once every 5 years, and it was generally agreed to be a most excellent way of establishing ties between young witches and wizards of different nationalities. The Triwizard Tournament of 1792 was much like the one we see in Goblet of Fire, with champions fighting for their school's honor, competing in 3 tasks designed to test the champion's courage, intelligence, resourcefulness, and magical ability. However, every time the tournament is held, the challenges differ, and it just so happens that in 1792, one of the challenges involved a cockatrice, a giant magical beast resembling a rooster with a lizard's tail. The participants were meant to capture the cockatrice in question, and, well, things didn't go exactly according to plan. With the dangerous creature on the loose, no one was safe, and that included 3 judges of the tournament, the heads of Hogwarts, Durmstrang, and Beauxbaton. After this happened, it was exceedingly difficult to get the tournament started again, as the challenges seemed to pose a significant danger to the general public. This is even reinforced by Dumbledore. There have been several attempts over the centuries to reinstate the tournament, Dumbledore continued, none of which has been very successful. However, our own departments of international magical cooperation and magical games and sports have decided the time is ripe for another attempt. We've worked hard over the summer to ensure that this time, no champion will find himself or herself in mortal danger. However, as we know, despite their best efforts to stop anyone else getting hurt from the Triwizard tournament, it later claimed another victim in Cedric Diggory. And that's it for today's video. If you haven't checked out parts 1 and 2 already, then I'll link them in the pinned comment. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and to forget to live